Hi, my name's Dave Darcy. I'm the editor-at-large at Australian Adventure Bike magazine, and this is my first attempt at giving you a podcast of some of the contributions I've made to that magazine over the year. And today we're going to start with issue 12, and there's two stories I'm going to present to you. The first is my It's a Mad World editorial, and secondly, I've got a great story for you about how I got into adventure riding. So the first is the editorial. It's a mad world and it's titled Chasing the Unicorn. We're so fortunate to live in this great brown land called Australia. There are not many other countries on this planet that offer endless kilometres of dirt tracks to explore on a motorcycle in the pursuit of what we now call motorcycle adventure. In reality, it's just getting out and about on a motorcycle with your mates, but that's not as sexy as motorcycle adventure. However, our huge country does throw up a challenge when it comes to riding extremes. To the far north, I found myself up to my armpits in crocodile infested waters, carrying bikes across flooded creeks with sticks through the spokes. Right along the length of the Great Dividing Range, I found myself struggling on rock strewn, greasy clay hill climbs that can bring the most hardened adventurer to tears. And then I somersaulted down the other side, bike in pursuit, and if I was really lucky, it wasn't a big twin. I've blasted through deep orange desert sand in heat that could melt the soles off my boots, and I've nearly fallen asleep at high speed in the outback on those endless straights that disappear into the horizon. I've ridden kilometres of boulder infested tracks that randomly put you off balance and occasionally send a rock flying at speed into the bash plate with potentially devastating effect. It's the extremes of this environment combined with its enormity that makes it impossible to have one adventure bike that can competently, confidently, and comfortably take on all that Australia can throw at it. There are some, shall I dare say, deranged riders who look at their mountain misty eyed with the pride that would make one of those competitive footy parents blush, and who firmly believe they have the answer. But ultimately, when pressed, they fall back to the fourth C word in the equation, the big C word, compromise. With the dust still clinging to my riding jacket after a recent blast through the Flinders Ranges of South Australia with Clubby, I realised the impossible challenge of finding that unicorn of ADV machines. On the Flinders trip, I was riding a big single, my Husqvarna 701, and Clubby was on a big twin, a Yamaha Super Tenere. The big single danced across the rocks, boulders and sand. Its lightweight, agility and power ensured that nothing stood in the way. Clubby, on the other hand, was delicately picking his way through the rocks and studying the stretches of sand before he committed. It was hard work, but the bike did it all just a little slower. On the wider and less technical tracks, we both had a blast. But my smiley face turned to a frown when we popped out of the gorges and creek beds for some long, flat transport miles. Now, let's put it out there, hundreds of Ks of outback roads on a big single at highway speed is not pleasant. Clubby, on the other hand, had his big twin purring along, and that mile muncher could do that all day, every day. At the end of the day, armed with the qualities of perseverance, determination, and a liberal dose of delusion, some riders may get tantalisingly close to finding the almighty unicorn. But for me, and I caution I'm going to go deep, motorcycle adventure is about sharing experiences with mates. And Clubby and I walked away from that Flinders trip having had the best time, unicorn or not. And really, that's all that matters. The next story I'm going to read out of issue 12 of Australian Adventure Bike magazine is the one I titled Hardwired for Adventure. Some of us discover adventure bikes later in life. For others, it's like we were born to ride them. This is AAB Editor at Large Dave Darcy's story. We've all seen it. Newborn ducklings, just seconds after cracking open their shells and taking their first breaths, instinctively they stride down to the water's edge and in they go. Evolution has hardwired them to love water and instantly be at home in it. Like those ducklings, I was hardwired for motorcycle adventure at a very early age. In fact, I can tell you the very day when my passion emerged. It was the summer of 1967, the time of my childhood. The last dinosaur had just died, seatbelts were an optional extra, smoking was good for your health. NASA was getting serious about landing a man on the moon. Australia made great cars, and the mullet was emerging as the preferred hairstyle for groovy young men. I was riding my dragster bicycle in a quarry in the northern suburbs of Sydney when a kid my age rode past on a lawnmower powered mini bike that his dad had made. It had wide, small wheels, no suspension, and ape hanger handlebars, just like those on my bicycle. But that mini bike conquered all the quarry obstacles effortlessly. I stood there with my mouth agape, my jaw almost touching my knees. I intensely felt a decent proportion of those deadly sins: envy, jealousy, and even some lust, although my body clock hadn't quite ignited that flame yet. Fast forward a couple of years, and my dad had accepted a promotion at work that took us to the country. And in one fell swoop, my passion for motorcycle adventure was locked and loaded. His job landed us at the foothills of the Wadigan Forest near Morisset, about 100 kilometres north of Sydney. I was soon to discover it was the epicentre of Adventureland, with hundreds of square kilometres of forest stretching north, south, east, and west, and thousands of kilometres of trails that stretched all the way to the Queensland border and beyond. With the family now enjoying a little spare cash, my persistent berating of my parents with requests for a Honda XL100 was finally successful. However, I still had the isolation of the country to deal with, and no riding buddies, and no one to learn from. But what I lacked in knowledge, I made up for in enthusiasm and passion. I turned to magazines to satisfy my thirst for knowledge and technique, and I found a quarry not far from Morisset where to this day I continue to practice my riding skills. I systematically explored every track around my new home, and my encyclopedic knowledge of the area rapidly expanded. Every new discovery was in itself a reward that built my passion for further exploration. I would confidently tell mum and dad roughly where I was going, but the reality was that if I crashed and seriously injured myself, they would never find me. As I progressed deeper into the Wadigans, some of the trails seriously tested my ability. Cut Rock was one of those memorable locations. If you've ridden it, you'll never forget it. I know I haven't. Broken bike parts always littered this fearsome series of rock ledges that are literally carved into massive slabs of solid sandstone. My first attempt was terrifying. At the ripe old age of 14, I managed to cross all the way west, up and over the Wadigans, and find the sleepy hamlet of Laguna. This was a big deal for me. I had discovered a new land, and to this day, when I visit Laguna and have a Moroccan lamb burger with a side salad of couscous surrounded by latte sipping well to dos on day trips from Balmain, I think back to that day with pride. After discovering Laguna, the sky was the limit, and I was up for new challenges. A few weeks later, with a 5 a.m. start, a topo map, 4 litres of petrol strapped to my back, I headed out with genuine trepidation and a goal to reach Wiseman's Ferry. It would be a 250-kilometre round trip deep into the wilderness, solo. For a 14-year-old, this was serious adventure. Fuel anxiety was real. No food, no water, no tools, no spare tube, no jelly snakes. Sometimes ignorance is bliss. The convict trail I followed back then is now closed to vehicles, But on that day, it was an unforgettable adventure. It had all the tension of not knowing what was around the corner and all the discoveries of exploring a convict past. This was motorcycle adventure in its rawest form, even if the term wouldn't become popular for many years to come. Winding down the escarpment overlooking the Hawkesbury River and the village of Wiseman's Ferry, while travelling on a spectacular handmade road supported by kilometres of mind-blowing convict stone masonry towering up to 10 metres in height, was a triumphant and fitting highlight for this expedition. And this was on a diminutive Honda XL100. But don't even think of going in there today on a motorcycle. It's all World Heritage listed now. Or you'll end up at Hanging Rock, where it's rumoured convicts were hanged. Still, I had made it. The sense of achievement from that ride had an intensity that has lasted my lifetime. The success of the Wiseman's Ferry ride propelled me to go farther and make more discoveries. Cessnock to the north, Capety to the west, Fraser Park to the east, and Wyong to the south were all soon dispatched with. However, nearby Wyong was also home to my nemesis, and the Red Baron was his name, a portly, efficient highway patrol officer who temporarily put my adventures on hold. The 3Us had clipped my wings, unregistered, unlicensed, uninsured. I dodged a summons to appear in children's court, but my law-abiding parents found it a little disconcerting to have a 6-foot-tall copper who was equally as wide come to the front door, invite him into our living room, and tell them how incredibly bad I'd been. Life is full of speed bumps, and I survived my brush with the law relatively unscathed. In the many years since those heady days spent exploring the Wadigans, I'm proud to say adventure bikes have taken me all around Australia, New Zealand, Asia, Europe, and on an epic London to Sydney journey in 2012 that generated enough memories to last a handful of lifetimes. Those intense and positive emotional experiences on the humble XL100 certainly TIG welded motorcycle adventure into my soul, and I'm happy with that. Well, that concludes our first podcast on Mad TV. Give us some feedback, tell us what you think. The next video you're going to see from Mad TV is our ride report from the Husky Trek in Gympie in Queensland. Nugget and I are taking our Husky 701s and we're really looking forward to that ride. Should be a lot of fun. It's 5 days of extreme adventure. So see you soon.